5 of the world's 14 peaks above 26,000 feet stand inside Pakistan. No other country on Earth holds that many in one place. Here, glaciers older than recorded history push through valleys wide enough to swallow entire cities. A cold desert carries sand dunes and snow at the same time, side by side, in the same frame. A lake born from disaster now glows turquoise through a corridor of pale stone. Mud volcano breathes slowly on a coastline where tectonic plates still press against each other beneath the surface. Beyond the geology, communities have built lives across some of the harshest terrain a human being can inhabit. Mountain roads carved into cliff faces, rope bridges spanning gorges, market streets that have absorbed traders from Kabul, Bukhara, and Central Asia for centuries. Pakistan carries extremes in every direction. The scale is real. The distance between a frozen glacier and a desert coast, between an ancient Sufi shrine and a disputed borderline, is not metaphor. This is the country in full. Skardu sits in Baltistan, in Pakistan's far north. Mountain roads converge at the foot of the Karakoram before branching toward the high valleys and glaciers beyond. The first stop is Katpana Desert, a few miles east of town. Cold deserts are rare. Katpana is one of the highest in the world, at 7,300 feet above sea level. Sand dunes rise beneath snow-covered ridgelines. In winter, snow sometimes settles over the dunes themselves. The contrast between fine sand and white mountain flanks arrives in a single, sudden glance. The road climbs from Katpana to Chunda Valley, rising 1,600 feet above the Skardu Basin. Snow peaks push above rooftops, poplar rows, and apricot orchards. Families here rely on short growing seasons, fruit cultivation, herding, and seasonal tourism. In the Chunda tea houses, the local drink is Balti butter tea, prepared with salt and butter stirred into the brew. It holds warmth in cold, dry air, better than plain tea does. Below Chunda, Satpara Lake gathers meltwater from the Karakoram at an elevation of 8,500 feet. The lake covers 1.5 square miles with a small island at its center. It supplies drinking water to Skardu and supports hydroelectric generation. In the early morning, the light shifts continuously over the water before the valley wind picks up. Shangri-La Lake, also called Lower Kachura, sits nearby at around 8,200 feet. The water turns darker green beneath the surrounding hills. Reflections last longer here than at Satpara, in quieter air. Deeper into Karmang Valley, Manthoka Waterfall drops roughly 1,000 feet through green terrain and open mountain air. Trout farms and roadside food stalls mark the approach. Kambir bread, apricot jam, and bowls of Malay noodle soup are common at the stops along the route. Skardu holds desert, valley, 3 lakes, and a waterfall within a single day's drive. (6,106 feet marks the summit elevation of Passu Cones, not the visible rise from the valley floor. The spires themselves rise from a valley floor at roughly 8,000 feet. The visible climb from road to peak is therefore closer to 7,000 feet of exposed limestone in a single wall. Passu Cones stand above the village of Passu in Gilgit-Baltistan, close to the Karakoram highway. Their other names are Passu Cathedral and Tupop Dan. The peaks are jagged in the specific way that high-latitude limestone erodes. Sharp ridges, near vertical faces, no smooth curves. Morning light catches the upper edges at a hard angle. Evening flattens them into dark profiles against whatever is still lit behind them. The Passu and Baltoro glaciers lie nearby, extending the visual scale of the scene well beyond the peaks themselves. The village below is predominantly Wakhi, with a community that is largely Ismaili Muslim. Families operate guest houses, work transport, and farm on narrow terraced plots. The Karakoram highway brought visitors, and visitors brought income, so the spires that define the skyline also underpin the economy. For For the Waki community, the peaks carry more than tourism. They appear in local memory, oral tradition, and cultural identity as a fixed reference point. The spires keep that position regardless of the season. "62 miles long and wide enough to fill a valley from wall to wall. Baltoro Glacier runs through the central Karakoram as one of the largest non-polar glaciers on Earth. Dark moraines stripe the surface along its full length. These are lines of rock debris, carried down from the valley walls as the glacier moves. The movement is slow, measured in feet per year. Accumulated ice presses downslope under its own weight, compressing snowfall from thousands of feet above into glacial mass over centuries. Altitude and cold maintain the cycle. Without them, the glacier retreats. Glacier melt feeds the Skardu River, which carries water to communities throughout Baltistan. Farming, household use, and local livelihoods in the valleys below depend on what comes off Baltoro and the surrounding ice fields. The trek to and along the glacier generates a separate economy. Porters, cooks, guides, drivers, and camp staff based in villages like Askol work the expedition and trekking seasons. K2, Broad Peak, and the Gasherbrum Massif all lie within reach of the Baltoro corridor. At Concordia, Baltoro meets the Godwin-Austen Glacier at close to 15,400 feet. Four of the world's 17 highest peaks appear on the horizon at the same time. The ground is bare rock and compacted snow. The wind comes off the ice in steady pulls. No trees, no soil, just the weight of peaks in every direction. A rounded mound of ash-colored earth rises from flat, bare ground inside Hingle National Park. Chandragup Mud Volcano is one of the largest active mud volcanoes in the region. At the summit, a shallow crater holds thick mud in slow motion. Gas pushes upward in irregular bursts. Each release sends low ripples through the surface. The sound is hollow. The air carries a faint mineral trace. The mechanism runs deep. Tectonic movement beneath the Makran coast forces pressurized gas, water, and fine sediment upward through fractures in the rock. The material reaches the surface and accumulates. The mound rebuilds itself continually as older material compresses and fresh sediment rises to replace it. The crater stands roughly 330 feet above the surrounding plain. For Hindu pilgrims, Chandragup marks a sacred stop on the route to Hinglaj Mata Temple, one of the largest Hindu pilgrimage sites in Pakistan. Pilgrims climb the slope, gather near the crater, and make offerings of food, grain, or flowers. Many believe the volcano's movement signals acceptance or refusal of what is brought to it. The pilgrimage draws tens of thousands annually, and the route supports local guides, transport workers, and small vendors along the path. Deep geological pressure and centuries of religious practice meet here. They share no common origin. They share this place. The mud shifts and the gas escapes, while the crater holds them both. Gwadar sits on Pakistan's southwestern coast in Balochistan, close to the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. One of the world's most transited shipping lanes passes within 60 miles of the harbor entrance. The port is deep water, capable of handling large commercial vessels. Breakwaters extend into the bay in hard, deliberate lines. Cranes mark the skyline above the container handling areas. Gwadar functions as the southern anchor of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Overland routes connect the port to Pakistan's interior and onward towards Central Asia. The plan involves freight handling, warehousing, free zone investment, and industrial development. Road and expressway upgrades around Gwadar form part of the same package. The older economy operates beside this infrastructure. Fishing has sustained families here for generations. Boat crews, fish traders, and local retailers depend on the catch, not the container yards. For many residents, the port represents potential access to larger economic opportunities. For others, the central question is whether infrastructure at this scale returns visible benefit to the communities already living on this coastline. The alternative is that it passes through without touching them. Both conditions exist here at the same time. The cranes rise above the harbor, while the fishing boats leave before sunrise. On the 4th of January 2010, a landslide buried the village of ATTABAD in Pakistan's Upper Hunza and dammed the Hunza River. Water rose behind the new barrier for 5 months. Villages upstream flooded, homes, fields, and sections of the Karakoram highway disappeared beneath the growing lake. ATTABAD Lake now stretches through a high mountain corridor in Gojal, along the old Karakoram highway alignment. The water surface sits at roughly 8,200 feet. The color runs from pale blue in shallow sections to intense turquoise in the deep center, shifting with the sun angle throughout the day. Pale cliffs rise on both sides. Snow peaks line the far horizon. The Karakoram Highway returned through a chain of tunnels bored into the cliff faces above the waterline. The new alignment follows the lake for several miles before rejoining the original route above the submerged sections. Local families now rely on boat transport, fishing, small guest houses, and roadside services. The lake supports daily economic activity through water crossings that replace the drowned road. For the communities of Gojal and Upper Hunza, ATTABAD carries two things at once. The memory of loss, carried without ceremony, a present built on the water that covered it. Boats cross the lake in the morning in complete quiet. The tunnels sit dark beside them, above the waterline, through the same cliff. The old road is still down there. Dry hills crowd both sides of the road in broken, irregular ridges. The valley narrows. Turns come without warning. KHYBER Pass cuts through the Spingar foothills between Pakistan and Afghanistan, connecting Peshawar on the eastern side to Jalalabad and Kabul on the west. For centuries, this was the primary overland route between the Indian subcontinent and Central Asia. Persians used it. Alexander's army moved through it in the 4th century BC. Mughal emperors crossed it in both directions. The British fought multiple campaigns to control it during the 19th century. Every large movement between these two regions had to account for this pass. The physical character of the route explains why. Steep shoulders drop away from the road on the valley side. Rock faces press close to the asphalt. Loose gravel and blind curves demand consistent attention. Heavy vehicles move through here regularly, sharing a road that offers little margin. The pass reaches roughly 3,500 feet at its highest point. The Karakoram Highway and the KHYBER Railway both trace versions of this same corridor. Driving here requires preparation. Brakes, tires, fuel, and daylight. A local driver familiar with the road's specific hazards changes the experience considerably. The hills are brown and dry. The bends reveal nothing until the road is already through them. History compressed through a gap in the mountains. That is KHYBER. Peshawar has been continuously inhabited for over 2,000 years. It stands in Pakistan's northwest, close to the eastern mouth of the KHYBER route. Gandharan, Mughal, Sikh, and colonial history layer inside a walled city still in daily use. Chisa Kwani Bazaar cuts through the center of the old city. The name translates as Bazaar of Storytellers. Traders from Kabul, Bukhara, and cities across Central Asia once stopped here along caravan routes. The tea houses along the road were where goods, news, and accounts of the journey changed hands. The market still operates with the same physical density: cloth sellers, cart vendors, tea counters, voices layered through narrow shop fronts. Mahabat Khan Mosque stands near the bazaar's main artery. Built in the 17th century, it carries white domes, tall minarets, and painted interior surfaces in the Mughal manner. The proportions inside are generous. Arched corridors and decorated walls retain their color in the diffuse light. Kahwa is the tea of Peshawar's old city. Green tea base, cardamom, and depending on the preparation, saffron, crushed almonds, or sugar. The taste is light and slightly bitter, with warmth that builds over the cup rather than arriving immediately. In Chisa Kwani, it marks hospitality. In the lanes near Sethi House, carved wooden balconies and fading painted facades from the 19th century survive in irregular condition. Namak Mandi carries the smoke of chapli kebab grills through the early evening. The old city moves on its own clock. The bazaar is a working market, not a curated display. (12,083 feet). At that elevation, Radigali Lake sits in a glacial cirque in the upper reaches of NEELUM Valley. Surrounding ice fields feed it. The route opens in July and closes before winter. NEELUM Valley runs northeast from Muzaffarabad, the capital of Pakistani-administered Azad Kashmir, for roughly 150 miles. The valley follows the NEELUM River from around 2,300 feet near the capital. At ATTABAD, the high alpine end, elevation exceeds 11,500 feet. The line of control, established in 1972, traces the river through much of the upper corridor. In some sections, the water itself forms the boundary. Villages on the opposite bank fall on the Indian-administered side. Through the middle stretch, dense oak, pine, fir, and cedar forests descend from both walls toward the river. The water runs clear through the lower gorges. The sound of the current stays with the road for the full length of the drive. It fades only where the valley widens and the river slows. Snow leopard move through the upper forests in low numbers. Himalayan brown bear feed along the forested slopes in summer before descending to the lower elevations before the cold. Kashmir markhor, a large wild goat with spiraling horns, work the rocky terrain above the tree line. Musk deer keep to the dense cover in middle elevation forest bands. The western Tragopan pheasant, among the rarest pheasants in the world, nests in old-growth conifer stands higher in the valley. Markhor once migrated seasonally across the Pir Panjal range into NEELUM from the south. The fencing that followed the ceasefire of 2003 cut that corridor permanently. The communities here live in timber and stone houses built across terraced slopes, with small orchards, kitchen gardens, and seasonal livestock. During the conflict years between 1989 and 2003, artillery exchanges forced most of the valley's population out. After the ceasefire, communities returned to damaged villages and rebuilt on the same land. The forest that covers the slopes today is partly the result of those years of low human activity. The river stays that clear partly for the same reason. In peak season, the road carries heavy traffic. Jeep convoys move toward the upper trailheads. Families picnic beside the river at the wide sections. The sound of the water moves under all of it. Rati Gali, when the route opens in July, holds a shallow lake of glacial blue-green in a bowl of bare rock and residual snow. Nothing else is up there except the wind and what the ice left behind. Above 13,000 feet, the land opens where no peaks press in and no valley walls contain the view. DEOSAI National Park spreads across a high plateau between Skardu and Astore in northern Pakistan. It covers roughly 1,200 square miles at an average elevation above 13,000 feet. DEOSAI is one of the highest plateaus on Earth. The landscape stretches in every direction without a fixed edge. Rolling plains rise and fall in long, unbroken lines. The sky is close. At this elevation, the light is sharper than it looks from below, and shadows move quickly over the ground as cloud cover shifts. In summer, wildflowers cover the plateau in red, yellow, and violet. The growing season is short, pressed between snowmelt in June and the first heavy snows of autumn. In winter, DEOSAI is buried under deep snow for months, and the plateau is effectively inaccessible. The Himalayan brown bear is the animal most closely identified with DEOSAI. It roams the open plains, feeding on roots, insects, and seasonal vegetation. Conservation programs launched in the 1990s when numbers had dropped to low double digits. The population has since recovered to several dozen confirmed individuals. Himalayan ibex work the rocky slopes at the plateau edges with the particular precision of animals that have calibrated their footing over generations. Golden marmots emerge in colonies over the open ground, alert and vocal. Their calls carry a long distance in thin air. The DEOSAI plains also feed the Indus system. Meltwater from the plateau drains into rivers that reach the plains far below. For the communities in Skardu and Astore, DEOSAI carries both practical and cultural significance. The plateau functions as a water source, a grazing ground, and a landmark that defines the northern limit of the known landscape. Light moves slowly over the plains at this elevation. A shadow takes several minutes to cross from one ridge to the next. The plateau holds the quiet that altitude produces when there is nothing left to interrupt it. Pakistan resists easy consumption. The distance between Katpana Desert and DEOSAI Plateau represents a complete shift in every variable: elevation, temperature, geology, culture, language, and history. The Karakoram highway connects some of it physically. The rest requires effort, long drives, high altitude, roads that close without warning. What persists throughout the country is a quality of scale that does not compress well. Baltoro's moraines stretch for 62 miles. DEOSAI stretches for 1,200 square miles, above 13,000 feet. Nanga Parbat drops 15,000 feet from summit to valley in a single face. These are not figurative numbers. The people who live within this terrain have built economies, traditions, languages, and architecture specific to each altitude, each valley, each watershed. Balti butter tea in Chunda, Kahwa in Chisakwani, Saji on the Makran coast. Each one shaped by conditions the geography imposed. Pakistan reveals its scale to those who stay in it long enough to let the distances register. The mountains are still there when the video ends. Pakistan stays with you as cold desert sand beside glacier melt, a swaying rope bridge, and a plateau touching the sky. Thank you for traveling with us through every mile of this journey. Your time means everything to us. God bless you, God bless your family, and God bless every journey you take. If this journey touched your heart, share it with your family, your friends, anyone who deserves to experience this. Subscribe and join us for the next one. We have special gifts waiting for you down the road.